Hey folks, today we talk about buying gold and other alternative investments. Now, one question I get asked from time to time from clients is, should I buy gold to diversify maybe my money's value or protect my money's value? Well, we'll take a look at this as well as some other considerations here in a minute. But we first have to start with a common argument I've heard most people use for owning gold, and that is, it's a hedge against inflation. Well, what does a hedge mean? It means that you use one thing that might, because of some intrinsic value, maintain that value relative to what you might believe something else to go down in value. Now, in the example of buying gold, you might buy gold or trade some dollars for gold because you believe gold has intrinsic value that is expected to either increase or maintain its value over time. Whereas you're concerned that dollars or the currency you're using is losing value because prices are rising maybe. So there's nothing really wrong with this thinking. Gold has historically kept up values above other maybe traditional asset classes like government bonds in low interest rate environments. But what happens when interest rates go up and other asset classes begin to look more attractive for growth? This proves tempting to the average investor who perhaps has seen a short-term decline in gold values. Now, many analysts would argue that gold is only a good hedge against inflation before inflation actually happens, and only over a very long period of time, like a century of time. If someone is looking for inflation protection, then historically looking at the inflation-adjusted stock market growth, like the S&P 500, for example, seems to be a better play, especially when compared to the past 30 years. The last 10 years with high inflation and a few poor performing years thrown in there makes it less of a growth story and more of just a flattened period and just holding value after adjusting for inflation. So should you buy gold? Well, maybe. There's a really better question I'll address in a minute that highlights why the question of should I buy gold is simply a distraction. But before I go there, we must talk about this next gold alternative, and that would be cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency has quickly become a buzzy niche alternative asset class, and I would argue has become the 21st century of hedging inflation with gold. The reason I say that is that traditional currency, gold and crypto, have all been used to transact goods and services throughout history. So if you were worried about the value of the dollar, for example, going down relative to its ability to purchase goods and services, then maybe you'd look to freeze that value or at least preserve it with swapping it out for gold or crypto before the drop in value. Now, the biggest problem with crypto is that it's so young and its fundamental valuations aren't solidified yet. They could be an inflation hedge in the future since, like gold, they can be used to make a transaction as well as there's a finite amount which cannot be printed or manipulated, like the dollar, via central bank and monetary policy. So these new and emerging technologies, which haven't seen mass adoption or stable valuation, are simply bought from a place of speculation. What does that really mean? And is it safe to use these as a means of preserving value? There is a lot of confirmation bias that takes place when these new speculative assets, in that there's a lot of attention from celebrities and other wealthy people. Large financial institutions and even state pension funds are also putting money into cryptocurrencies. But does that make it a safe place for your dollars? That answer is still no. When we look at something that is speculative, it means that it has a number of risk factors that make it so. For example, it's difficult to value, especially in times of volatility. It has liquidity risks, incomplete or obscure financial data, extremely immature and new markets with no real track record or history. For these reasons alone, buying something on speculation doesn't fit with the theme of trying to protect and preserve the value of something else. So what about the question, should I buy gold or crypto? This question brings up a real issue that all questions around inflation and investing in different asset classes to avoid really miss. The problem with these questions is that they take the focus off of what most people should be thinking about, and that is having a calculatable plan based on long-term assumptions that have proven a level of stability and predictability over time. Another way of putting it is that we should focus on asking, am I growing my wealth and or protecting it all in conjunction with my plans for the future? Will these actions help move towards or away from accomplishing my goals for the future? You see, if we're concerned about inflation, that's not really a bad thing. At the very least, it means we're paying attention. But it's really secondary to following through on and planning for the future, which for most people is achieving and staying financially independent throughout their lifetime. And to give an example, it'd be more akin to hoarding cash at home or in a checking account because you didn't want to pay taxes on any growth. That might be fine in itself, but doing so might not be the best option if your main goal was to not run out of money in retirement, especially if you knew through prior planning and calculations you needed to earn interest on those dollars to above what the checking account was crediting you to really make it last. So the key takeaway really is that, yes, gold can certainly be a part of your portfolio, as many other assets and investments can be. But more importantly, you should be asking what the action of buying gold is going to fulfill for your long-term financial success. If it checks all your boxes, then fire away. If not, then maybe take a step back and assess your broader goals and go in another direction. Thanks for joining us today. Now, if you found this insightful, please share this with someone you care about and hit the button before you go. And as always, keep doing life better, and we'll see you next time.